All right. Good morning, everyone. To the members at the table, thank you for being here. To folks on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. My name is Pamela. I am one of the co-chairs of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. Brian is unable to be here today as he has another obligation and new venture to embark on. And so you're stuck with me solo. Thank you in advance for your patience and kindness. We have been informed that we do have quorum, so I will call meeting 17 of the Aboriginal Advisory Committee to order. The meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology with members and staff connecting by video conference or by calling in. Because we are meeting remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. We have registered public speakers on 4 items of our agenda today, and the public can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. I would like to remind all staff and presenters to keep their mic muted with their video turned off unless they need to address the committee. This will make it easier for us to, and those watching on YouTube, to observe members as they participate in the debate and vote on each item. Members, please keep your mic muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item, and please ensure that your video is on. As part of each agenda item, we will ask members to raise their hand or unmute their mic if they wish to question staff or speak. We will then create a speakers list and we'll call on members when it is your turn. When voting on an item or motion, I ask that you ensure that your video is on and you raise your hand to indicate your vote. I want to remind you that although you are participating remotely, you must submit your motions in writing to the committee secretary. The clerk staff are available by email at AAC@toronto.ca to help you with motions. This will be strictly enforced today as I am solo, and supporting the write-ups of motions will not be an option on my end. So please submit your motions in writing. To start off the meeting in the right way, we will now have an offering by Selena Young, Director of the IAO, to be followed by an opening blessing by Suzanne Brunel. And I will pass it to you too.
Merci, Pamela. I'm just lighting the medicines now. I have some prairie sage and some cedar that I harvested recently, just to add a bit of purifying energy to the medicines today. Sending smoke in each of your directions and for all of us here today, and hope you can imagine what it's like to receive it. And I'll do my best to keep the medicines burning for us, with us, for our time together today. Merci.
Suzanne, you may go ahead.
Merci very much. Merci, Selena, for the smudge. Thinking about the smudge and why we smudge, let's bring the intent of the smudge to wherever each of us happens to be for this meeting, and as best as we can, clear the air around us, each of us, of negative energy, clear our minds of negative thoughts, clear our hearts of negative feelings, and join today's meeting with calmness in our souls. Merci, Miigwech Creator, for all your gifts and for all your blessings. We invite all our ancestors to join this circle, to sit with us and keep us grounded in our shared values. Above all, that of respect. We also extend our gratitude to Mother Earth for all that she provides, Merci for bringing back spring and all the promises this season brings. Merci for these beautiful days when we can reconnect with all our relations, especially the four-legged, the winged, crawling, and rooted relations. Merci also for the challenges and opportunities we experience along our paths, also for the technology that enables us to gather virtually in support of each other and in support of our communities. So with that, I say miigwech, merci, thank you for all your blessings.
Miigwech to you both for that beautiful opening to start us off in a good way. So although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee acknowledges the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now many home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know what your declaration of interest is and on which item of the agenda. Seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last committee meeting on March 8th? Francis, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. So before proceeding to consider the agenda items, we'd like to add a new item of business from Councillor Layton. I understand that Councillor Layton was, oh, there he is. That Councillor Layton will introduce his new item, and I will ask the secretary to display the item so that the committee members can review it before voting to add it to the agenda. And I'll pass it to you, Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. My apologies for this coming late to the meeting, but given the number of meetings we had left, I just wanted to make sure that we could put it on. This is to potentially to review a voluntary proposed tax contribution to support reconciliation and justice. This has to do with a program the city has to voluntarily submit additional revenues to the city for specific programs, but reconciliation and justice for Indigenous people isn't included in that. This was a recommendation that came from community to me, and I just wanted to put it in front of this committee before I did anything with it and left this group decide.
Thank you. So the new item would be 17.12, potential to review a voluntary property tax contribution to support reconciliation and justice. Councillor Layton, would you like to move a motion to add this item to the agenda as new business?
Please, thank you very much. I don't think there's any urgency to the matter, but I did just want to bring it to this committee before it went anywhere else.
That's great, thank you.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. Look at us go. Thank you. So with the new item that was just added, there are 12 items on our agenda today, and we will now proceed to consider all of those items. And the first item is 17.1, Service Canada, an overview of programs and services to Indigenous communities in Toronto. We have Sarita Sensosi, Senior Citizen Services Specialist, and Heather Chalmers, Team Leader, Employment and Social Development Canada, who will give a presentation to the committee. If you are ready, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you again, the advisory panel, to invite Service Canada to participate in your meeting today. Good morning, bonjour. My name is Sarita Chinsoni. I'm a Senior Citizen Services Specialist, also known as Outreach for Service Canada in the City of Toronto. We're given this opportunity this morning to give you a brief overview of what exactly Service Canada is all about and what sort of programs we administer and serve on behalf of other federal departments. And I will also provide you with some information on how your communities or agencies can reach out to us directly in providing assistance in terms of in-person clinics for your youth, your seniors, employment insurance, and so forth. We also provide information virtually as well. Today's information that I'm about to present is based on the current procedures and directives of the department as of today's date, which is May 18, 2022. For the most current and up-to-date information, I do encourage you to visit canada.ca. So a little bit of history of what exactly is Service Canada. Service Canada was created in 2005, where the federal government decided to bring along a number of federal government programs and services under one roof. So for our public in general could access those programs and services and not having to be redirected to other places and reline up again to get those services. You can access our services through our 1-800 number or online, where you can submit a request online and somebody from Service Canada will attend to that request within 2 business days and assist our clients or partners or employers. If we're unable to do so over the phone, we will then book an appointment with that client or employer to come in person to receive that service in person. Due to COVID-19, or regardless whether the province or the city has now, have new measures in relations to COVID-19 measures, Service Canada remain under the Public Health Agency of Canada, which means we continue to have, social distancing, wearing masks, and slowly but surely an increased number of staff are returning to our in-person services across Canada. We have over 320 points of service where clients, the public, can come in and reach and access those services. We also have a dedicated line called the Service Canada Outreach Support Center for anyone who may not have access to internet or have language barriers. So they can contact us directly and we will be able to support them and even apply for any types of benefits they may be applying for in over the phone. We have also a telephone interpretation service. This service is available for anyone who may have some language barriers, including we have 4 indigenous languages that we provide translations to. So not to worry about that. Within Service Canada, we have many different what we call business lines. I work for Service Canada, the Citizen Services branch, dealing directly with the public. Within that department, we have a community outreach and liaison services department. This is for Toronto and across Canada as well. This is a dedicated team of specialists who will assist any communities, including yours, in providing this hands-on services to your communities and your clients. And we want to make it as barrier-free as possible and them not having to come and line up. I'm sure you've seen many long lineups at our Service Canada centers lately. Some of them, I'm not going to go into too much details in specific programs, but I will give you a bit of information such as employment insurance and Canada pension, social insurance number, and passport, to name a few. Employment insurance is for anybody who has worked in insurable employment and suddenly find themselves in temporary or permanent layoff. Can they apply for employment insurance? The answer would be yes. They can apply online or in person. We also have sickness benefit for anybody who may be ill and cannot work at this particular time. There are 15 weeks of sickness benefit under the employment insurance program. If somebody is looking to receive the 15 weeks, I would recommend that they get a medical certificate and submit that along with their application. So there is no need to get an up-to-date medical after 4 weeks. So sickness benefit is 15 weeks. Maternity benefits, or anybody applying who recently had a child, and that is 15 weeks payable to the mother or to the surrogate mother. Parental benefits are 35 weeks that can be shared by either parent from same sex or opposite sex. We have compassionate care benefits payable to somebody who may have to take time off from work to care for a loved one who's gravely ill and unfortunately who could be dying in the next 26 weeks. Those benefits can be collected in Canada or outside Canada. Of course, there will be a medical certificate from the attending physician from that person who is gravely ill, and then that will be accompanied with the application. We also have family caregiver benefits for adults and children, and this is when someone has to take out time off to look after perhaps an adult member in the family who's gravely ill. And that is 15 weeks, and for children, it is 35 weeks in duration. We also have Canada Pension. As you know, anyone who's working in insurable employment contributes to the Canada Pension Plan. Therefore, when they do decide to retire, they will be entitled to receive their Canada Pension payment and old age pension. For old age, you don't have to work a day in Canada to receive that benefit. You only have to be 65 years of age and have a minimum residency of 10 years in Canada. With the announcement of Budget 2025, as of July 2022, any person over the age of 75 will automatically receive a 10% increase on their old age pension. They don't have to do anything. That will come automatically as of July 2021. Social insurance number. In order to legally work in Canada, everybody has to have a valid social insurance number. Now, there are several ways of obtaining that social insurance number. You can do it now online and submit your application and your necessary documents in order to get your social insurance number mailed to you. We can conduct a clinic specifically for you, for your agency, and where we will come in person and do that as well. Anyone who may want to change their current name on their social insurance number to their Indigenous name, that also can be arranged and a clinic can be offered to get that done. Also, for anybody who wishes to change their current name on their passport, Canadian passport application, to their Indigenous name, which is a free service, that can be arranged as well, and it will be conducted via a clinic. Some other services that we do have for Indigenous communities specifically is the Indigenous Skills Employment and Education strategy, training strategy. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but if you're not, if you're requesting training funding to for your specific client groups, you can put in a proposal and request for funding for that. We have also Indigenous support for seniors in the assisted living program. This is to assist First Nation people with functional limitations due to age, health problems, or a disability. There are funding associated with that as well. A good news story, I suppose, would be the mass hiring currently happening with the federal government and all departments, including Employment and Social Development Canada. And we are, if you need to know more about it, again, I'm going to leave my email contacts so you can reach me directly. We are also hiring at Service Canada for any Indigenous candidate who may be looking for work at this particular time. There are several internship and volunteering programs that the youth can get engaged in, such as Exchanges Canada, International Youth Programs, and the Cadet Instructor Program. The other information I wanted to say for anybody who was working either on the reserve, on a reserve, or they can also contribute access to the Canada Pension Plan, and there's special process that we need to administer in order to get that done for anybody who may be working on reserve as well. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I could entertain any questions you may have. Again, the purpose of my attending your sessions today is to let you know that we do have a dedicated team of outreach workers who are ready, willing, and able to assist your agencies in any capacity. And it's just a matter of reaching out to us, or you can reach out to me personally, and we can arrange for you to get that service offsite and either virtually or in person. There are many seniors, for example, Indigenous seniors who have not yet applied for their old age. And they are missing out on a lot of resources that they have not yet received. So we could arrange for a what we call a pension clinic where we can assist those seniors applying for those benefits. So I'll wait for your questions if you have any. I hope I wasn't going too fast, but I know I was given not too many minutes this morning.
Thank you so much for your informative presentation. Frances has her hand up with a question.
Thank you, Sarita. That's terrific. I'm glad to see you're earning your keep. When you're if perhaps you do have a seniors clinic to help the seniors apply for funding that is theirs, will you have Indigenous people to do that clinic for them so they're comfortable? Will you have Indigenous staff?
Yes, so we do have some, but not many. That's why there's a big push in recruitment of more Indigenous personnel in our centers to represent the communities at large that we serve, right? So, but there are some that will come along with us to do it in person.
Any other questions or comments from members? Please raise your hand. Okay. Seeing none, I think just the important piece is that we make sure we get your contact info, because I think there's a lot of agencies that could make direct relationships and connections to set up different types of clinics and info sessions, because I think there was a lot of information here I knew, but a lot that I also didn't know that I think would be extremely beneficial for community members. So are there any other speakers who wish to speak to this item? Raise your hand. Seeing none, do I have a motion to receive the item? Angus, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Fantastic. The motion carries. Thank you so much again for your presentation and your time today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so our next item is 17.2, resignation from the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. This is a letter from the city clerk placed on the agenda to inform us of the resignation of Suzanne Stewart from the committee. And we have one registered public speaker. Tiffany Malley, are you ready? Do we have Tiffany? Okay. Okay, so welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes to speak on the item. When you are getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. And I'm reminding all speakers today to please speak to the item at hand. And your 5 minutes will begin now. Please go ahead.
Bonjour, good morning. Woman who is as beautiful as the fire. It's an honor again to attend and to come to the circle and to speak. I only get 5 minutes, so I think I signed up for 3 items or 4, so I get a whole 20 minutes, and I'm really excited to share what's in my heart and what's in my spirit, eh? It's unfortunate that Suzanne isn't able to be at the committee. I'm a little bit observant, that she never came to any meetings. I wish her luck in her journey. I would like to let the committee know that I've been coming to these meetings before a lot of the committee members, the new ones. And, you know, when I come to these meetings, I get really nervous. It takes like a lot of anxiety. I almost feel like I'm not supposed to be here. But I know that I am, eh? I know that I'm really gifted. And although there's one open seat, uh, yeah, ask Suzanne. When I had an opportunity to talk to her, I say, you know, are you going to recommend that seat that you're not wanting to me? And she never really answered. But unfortunately, we all know for the next 3 items, we're really going to be discussing how to ensure community is involved. And I really look forward. Like I said, I'm really nervous. I bet y'all don't get nervous, but I really am. And I'm really excited because I work so hard on these 5-minute deputations. I want to be included. I'm really valuable. I'm a truth teller. Sometimes truth tellers aren't really, you know, a good fit for the circle. But I do acknowledge, since I've been coming for almost 2 years now, I'm a really valuable member of my community. I've known that for years. But most importantly, I'm a valued person in this circle, and I come with a lot of knowledge and wisdom. And I really look forward to having a really open discussion. I'd really love to hear from our community members that haven't really spoken a lot since they've been on. And I'd really love your input for the next couple items. It's really important to understand that as a collective, kind of like Francis says, you know, Francis, that good old saying, we do things our own way. So I really look forward to doing things our own way and really developing a place for community, eh? For community like me to not have just 5 minutes to have a seat. And I can't wait to talk about that. So, miigwech, have a good day, everyone. Maha.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Are there any questions for the public speaker from members? Okay. Seeing none, I'll just add, Tiffany, thank you for your ongoing effort and commitment. And I felt a lot of heart and grace in your spirit today. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you for addressing the committee. Do I have a motion to receive this item? Angus, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Great, the motion carries. So our next item is 17.3, options for the public appointments process for the AAAC. This is a report from the city clerk with a recommendation to receive the item as information. We will begin with the staff presentation on this item, and then we will hear from the registered public speakers before moving it back to the committee. So we have Matthew Cowley, acting manager, Public Appointments Secretariat, City Clerk's Office, who will give us the presentation. So Matthew, if you are ready, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for having me here today. Let me just get my slides up on the screen here so everyone can see what I'm talking about. And can you see the slides now full screen? Can someone, Pamela, can you confirm? Thanks very much. All right,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
Thank you, Francis, as well. So again, thank you very much for having me here today. I was originally scheduled to present at your March meeting, and unfortunately we ran out of time. So you'll see my slide there. It still says March 8th, but of course, here we are in May. So this presentation accompanies a report on this item, which is on the agenda. If you haven't read the report, the presentation is intended to cover all the major points that are covered in the report. So it's the same content. I've just distilled it a little bit here for a presentation. So I'll try and make this as clear as possible. And let me get right into it. So what is this report about? So as many of you will recall, in August, this committee passed a motion to ask council to direct staff to report back on options for a revised public appointments process for the next term of this committee. There's been a lot of discussions, as everyone knows, over the past couple of years of this committee about things like the public appointments process and representation and governance and terms of reference and all that sort of stuff. And the part that I'm responding to today, again, is that specific direction to talk about options for the process. So how people apply, how people are selected and join the committee, and if that could maybe be done a bit differently. So as was mentioned a few moments ago, a number of new members were added to the committee. It was actually the end of last year, so it was about 6 months ago now, pardon, 5 months ago. So that was following a selection process in the fall of 2021. And the process was very similar to what is done for other council advisory bodies. So candidates applied through the website that's hosted by my office. A panel of 5 Indigenous city staff from different areas reviewed the applications and conducted interviews and recommended candidates to City Council. That's kind of the process in a nutshell. And what I'm here today again to talk about is just some options for how things could be done differently. And you can think of this as a way to at least start the conversation. So I'm not trying to say this is everything, but these are just some things. And I've tried my best to reflect some of the things that I've heard from committee members over the times that I've been in these meetings over the past few years, and some advice from colleagues in the Indigenous Affairs Office, and so on. So what I wanted to start before I get into the details, obviously, a revised public appointments process should really consider ways to respect Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. And the process should really think about how it can advance the city's efforts to meet the Reconciliation Action Plan. And I think if a new process is adopted, we're of the view that it should, of course, try to reflect the mandate of the committee and the ways in which First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities in Toronto would like to participate. So if we're going to come up with something different, we should really try and make it reflect the needs and interests of the members whose voices are intended to be around the table. So I'm going to talk about it in under four general themes. I'll talk a bit about the outreach and recruitment. I'll talk a bit about the actual application process, a little bit about selection and interviews, and then the nominations and appointments process. So I'll talk about those four main areas here. So starting with outreach and recruitment, for the for the positions that were available in the fall, we worked with the Indigenous Affairs Office to do outreach through social media. We sent news out to local organizations. We shared the news, obviously, through this committee. We have a mailing list that we used, an email list. So we tried some things like that, but I think some ideas of some more things we could do. Here's a few ideas. So for example, we could host some information sessions. They could be virtual, they could be in person, depending on the public health situation. Information sessions to talk in a little more details about what the committee's about, what it does, how to apply, and these sessions could be co-hosted with local Indigenous organizations as one suggestion. We could do more to spread the word using posters and printed materials at community centers, service providers, gathering places, and things like that. And also, building up to that outreach and recruitment, do some consultation with Indigenous communities in Toronto to look at the language and the imagery and sort of the verbiage that we use when we use that outreach to see if it will better resonate with the communities that we're trying to connect with. So a few high-level ideas there. In terms of the actual application process, so again, as I mentioned a minute ago, for the last round of appointments, people applied through our website, our public appointments website, which has applications for all sorts of different city boards and committees. So that application, the questions are unique to this committee, but the general format and the general sort of look and feel of what we ask people to do is very similar to what it would be for when you're applying for the library board or the Board of Health or the TTC or things like that. So there could be an opportunity to do something different. So instead of just having written answers to sets of questions, one suggestion is that people could include an attachment, sort of an open format, a written attachment, if they want to write something that sort of is not within the boundaries of just a simple question and answer format. And another suggestion is that people could share, and we can work out the technical way to do this, but people could share an audio file or a video file if they want to express orally why they want to join the committee, what they would help to contribute, or anything else they would want to share. So instead of just relying on a sort of more standard resume kind of format thing, something that allows people to speak a little bit more in their own voice. When it comes to the selection and the interview process, there are, again, some more options we could look at. So in the fall, we had, as I said, a panel of those 5 Indigenous city staff who did selection and sort of followed a fairly standard kind of interview format. So in terms of that selection process, we could have a panel like that again. Another idea is we could have a panel of, say, Indigenous residents who do the selection and interviews and nominations. I would suggest that it maybe those members be people who aren't on participating organizations. So it's sort of a people who aren't necessarily invested in the outcome, but it could be Indigenous residents and elders who could bring a great community view to the process, or there could be a mix of that. It could be a mix of city staff, Indigenous residents, and so on. So that's one selection, that's one option or set of options for the panel. In terms of the actual interviews, we could do group sessions with multiple candidates. So it could be sort of a collaborative discussion with people all together in one place. We could have elders as part of these sessions to help them happen in a good way and offer support to participants. So these group sessions, rather than think of them as just a standard sort of cookie cutter interview, could allow for a little more discussion amongst the group about what people and sort of what communities could contribute to the committee and how and why. And that could be followed up with some smaller one-on-one discussions. So a few ideas there to look at. Now, in terms of what we call the nominations and appointments process, so the nominations is when is sort of the second last stage of the process. So people apply, there's sort of a selection process, interviews of some kind, the list gets kind of whittled down a little bit, and nominations, of course, when we say, okay, there are 5 spots or 10 spots or whatever on this committee, here are those final people. Now, under the current model, appointments to this committee go through City Council's Civic Appointments Committee. So someone does the selections and interviews, a report goes to that Civic Appointments Committee, and they send it on to City Council. So that's the current model. Now, if there are changes to how this committee is governed and structured and changes to the terms of reference, that could also change in the next term. So that nominations process is somewhat dependent on if there are changes to that bigger picture stuff, which is a little bit outside of my scope, but we would certainly work, we would follow that lead. And so the current process, as I said, that aligns with how council looks at appointments to other advisory bodies, like the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Body, the Toronto Music Industry Advisory Committee, things like that. But if the committee exists in a different form in the next term, if it's a different type of committee, then there are options for that nominations and appointments process. Those options might change as well. So as I said, in addition to these options, there's other things that could be considered for the next term of council. And I know there's an item coming up after me that's going to talk a bit about terms of reference. I know there's been discussions around this committee about the meeting procedures, how the committee kind of conducts itself and considers agenda items and stuff like that. And there has been some discussion about how the committee is structured and governed and all of that. So that there's kind of a real watershed effect from those things. So if there are other decisions made about those big pieces, then our team would sort of follow that lead and make sure that the new public appointments process reflects some of the principles that I talked about a few minutes ago, and also, addresses, how many people we're looking for, what kinds of, are we looking for community members of organizations, what kind of mix, all that kind of stuff. So we would follow that we would follow that flow. So those are the options in summary. There's my contact information there, but I will end my slideshow. That's the end of my presentation.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So we're going to hear from the registered speakers, and then we'll bring it back to the committee for questions and comments. So we have 2 registered public speakers. Our first person to speak is Tiffany. Tiffany, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Ani Bojo, again, I would like to say miigwech to the committee. I would also like to acknowledge Matthew for taking the time to talk to me, help me understand these new transferable skills that I'm learning, eh? I don't really know a lot about these type of committees. All I know is 2 years ago, December 5th, my daughter, she got abducted, and she was also very close to being the next MMIG. And I really just wanted to get help for my family. So who knew that by coming to the advisory committee and just wanting help, 2 years later, I would be here really speaking for community to ensure our voices are heard and really part of these tables, these circles that you guys are upon. I would really like to take the members back to February 21, agenda item AA132, filling vacancies in the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory membership. Selena presented to the committee nice little presentation about possible strategies to recruit new members, because at that time in February 21 there was 7 empty seats. Following February 10th, well, that meeting, this item, this great agenda item, it was brought back to the committee for discussion 3 more times. As you see, we're here again discussing it. It appears we're all in different ideas of what the community should look like when it comes to this process. What's crazy is one of the board members, she made a motion. She made a motion that stated that she recommended that the executive committee put forward a motion that 4 community members, including myself, would be appointed to the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. That's before the new members who are here came. So that motion was seconded, and unfortunately, what ended up happening was there was a special meeting that was scheduled to just talk about this item, eh? Unfortunately, that meeting was canceled within 48 hours, not even knowing there was another meeting scheduled. So I was really excited to make it there. Me and my 2 other community members, one who's going to be speaking next. We're really excited to talk about how to make sure that we can get a seat on this committee. Unfortunately, only less than 50% of the members showed up for this meeting. Unfortunately, as the discussions led, the members kept leaving. So unfortunately, there was no quorum, but there was an opportunity to really look at this in a larger picture. What does this look like? Again, people had some ideas. And so here we are today. And why the historical context is important to share is because, as you can see, I'm still standing on the other side. I didn't get a seat on the committee, although I did apply. And the IO and the ACC, I feel that they should recommend and endorse a motion and a recommendation that I actually made multiple times. If you don't want to give us a seat, then create an advisory engagement community committee that works with the IO, the TASAC, and the ACC. I would be more than honored to coordinate this initiative for our community. I look forward to discussing in the next agenda item how the terms of reference can be amended to ensure, whether you want to admit it or not, We are good people and we deserve to also be on the committee. We have great gifts. We have a lot of value. And as I shared, it feels pretty sad when we're feeling rejected. I would encourage everyone to watch that special meeting. I actually listened to it last night and it was so traumatic. I'm really proud because apparently my children can, when I move on, they can watch these videos, watch their mom standing up for community, standing up for our people. And I'd really like to hear the members speak to this item. I'm hoping everyone has some context to it. And I really encourage everyone to talk. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Members, do you have any questions for the public speaker? Seeing none, our second registered speaker is Miguel Avila Velarde. Are you ready?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. So you will have 5 minutes to speak. When you are getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Please go ahead.
Okay, good morning. My name is Miguel. I'm Indigenous. I had 3 children. They are the reason I'm an activist at City Hall since the year 2010. After losing my job unfairly at the Toronto Zoo in 2009. Moving forward to 2022, I am a member of the Regent Park Neighborhood Association of Regent Park. I am a tenant rep for my building, 220 Oak Street, a TCAC property. I am a member of the Coalition for Community Benefits Agreement for Phases 4 and 5 of the Revitalization of Regent Park. By the way, we want $26.8 million for the community benefits to be implemented in the next 15 years. With my credentials and my resume previously attached to the appointments committee, I don't understand why I can't qualify. In June 28th, as Tiffany mentioned, thank you, Tiffany, for your deputation. It was very powerful to hear from you. The motion included to add people who are land and water defenders, which is, myself, Catherine, and Tiffany. We have attended for a long time this committee. So I am glad that out of that conversation, the terms of reference will be created for this AAAC, and we hoped that you can include members from grassroots organizations. As I mentioned, my sister, either Catherine or Tiffany. I don't think I can at the moment. And yesterday when I attended the appointments committee for orientation for prospect people to run for Ward 13, I was told that my question will be answered because I have a problem with regards to a ticket. I got a Trinity Balbus Park, so I'm confused. Anyway, so again, I ask you please to consider again to include people like Tiffany L. Catering. I am not going to ask you to run because of my situation, my legal situation. So thank you. Also, I want to ask you also one recommendation. Look, you added 10 more members in November 2021. And last meeting in March 2022, you didn't have quorum after lunchtime. And that is a trend. And we should change it. You know what we should be doing is offering people some vouchers in the cafeteria so that they can have money to eat. Most of us, we don't have the privileges of having a salary or, benefits. So we rely on ODSP or on Title Works. So, we come here freely. We come with good ideas and we come here with good intentions about all, because we have been treated bad by the system. We have living experiences and we can provide positive contributions. We're not here to derail the committee. We're not here to throw people under the bus. We are here to make sure that the reconciliation plan approved by City Council makes promise of those recommendations to be implemented. So what a good start we will be if you add today one of the 2 sisters I mentioned, either Catherine or Tiffany. I want to be neutral. but I think those two ladies will make an amazing contribution to this committee. And hopefully, above all, you guys will continue the meeting after lunch and complete the agenda in lieu of the few meetings that you have during the year.
1 minute.
And thank you for the, well, I'm gonna wrap it up. As you know, grassroots organizations out there, they have made claims that we need to rename city streets and place and parks. One of the recommendations made by those groups are that we rename Young and Dundas and we call it Landback Square. And I don't understand why the mayor Tory, in a flip of a pencil, can make such a recommendation to change a street, call it Ukraine Plaza, Ukraine Street, without any advice from the people. But we Aboriginals, why we have to beg to participate in this process and ask for its truth to be known that this land belongs to Indigenous peoples, and what we want is land back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll just remind the public speakers to try as much as possible to stick to the item at hand in their 5 minutes, and open the floor for any questions for Miguel. Okay, seeing none, thank you for addressing the committee today. And we have heard from all of our speakers on this item. So members, do you have questions or comments for staff on this item? Suzanne?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matthew, for walking us through the report. I found it very, very interesting. I like reading all of the possible options, and maybe we can think of more. I also want to thank Tiffany and Miguel for sharing your perspectives. Now, one question for you, Matthew. The mandate of this committee, I think we need to be clear. Like, we have no say. We as a group have no say on the mandate. It is set by the city, right?
Thank you for that question. I think the answer is both yes and no. So you're right that the mandate is confirmed by council. So the beginning of each term of council, typically there's a report from the city manager's office that talks about what we call council advisory bodies and which ones are recommended to be established. So council considers that report and makes the final vote on that. But I also know, and there's colleagues from the city manager's office who are listening to today's meeting as well, that I think in crafting, in the work leading up to that report, a lot of the input, which I think staff have heard from this committee over the past couple of years, inform that discussion. So the mandate isn't just crafted without considerations for feedback that have come from committee members or from members of the community. So I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I would say that I think my colleague Brendan Nolan will probably be part of the next discussion item if there's questions on that. And so the shortest answer is I think the committee members definitely have a large impact on the mandate, but the final vote on that mandate is an item that comes before City Council. But also, when that report goes to City Council, it also starts by going to City Council's Executive Committee. And without getting too into the details of all that, when items come to Executive Committee, that's also an opportunity for any members of the public, committee members or anyone, to also speak at that committee, just like some members of the public are doing here today. So there are other opportunities to feed into that process as well. I hope that answers the question.
I think what I'm getting at is I think we need to be clear as to just how much influence or lack of influence this committee has on moving things forward. Like, do we have an exaggerated idea of our influence, or is it quite narrow?
That's an excellent question. I would say that, you know, committees can request changes to their terms of reference, which would include their mandates while they are active. I'm not the expert on that process, but I know that has been done for other advisory committees. So there are committees like this one that have changed their name to better reflect what they feel their purpose and their representation is about. Or there are committees that have changed other aspects of how they exist. So you know, similar to other items that this committee would look at, the committee can have those discussions, and that item, again, under the current model, still goes through city council. But the committee can have those types of discussions, and it's not just something that can only happen every 4 years at the beginning of a term of council. So so there are, I don't know if that's all the detail you're looking for, but there are opportunities for the committee to do that as it's functioning as well. And I think Brendan, are you in the WebEx meeting here? You might be able to chime in and answer that question a bit better as well.
Hello, through the chairs. My name is Brendan Nolan. I'm from the City Manager's Office. We call it Governance and Corporate Strategy, the technical long name. Just to expand a little bit about what Matthew was saying, as he was saying there, committees, of course, can request changes to their mandate, changes to their terms of reference, which would go up through the committee, in your case, executive committee, and then council, you know, for consideration. Of course, they are considered, their advisory bodies are constituted by council to provide that advice, but it is an active discussion. And I think if a committee, when looking at its work plan, when looking at its mandate, feels that there's an area that's missing, or that there's something that has changed, something that it feels that it must address. And I think this is a great example, you know, that we have the RAP report, especially now, and you know, that there's a lot of areas that this is sort of a growing area of work, that you know, within the period of time, that there needs to be some adjustments to its mandate, or that needs to, you know, it feels constrained by what it currently is. It certainly can submit recommendations to, in this case, it would probably be executive committee, feeling that, you know, well, we need to have these changes. Well, we feel for whatever reasons that, you know, this needs to be addressed. And council can, and committee can certainly take that under advisement and make the appropriate motions as they feel fit. And certainly members can come and depute at executive committee if they feel fit, or see fit to do that. It is an active discussion because it is meant, the advisory bodies are meant to just be doing that, to provide active advice and discourse on city policies and city services. It's not meant to sort of just be a fixed, locked in piece that, you know, okay, work on this and sort of go away. That's why it's framed as a set of recommendations, and recommendations from advisory bodies, but it is meant to be a sort of a two-way street in that. I hope that helps a bit.
Steve?
Yeah, hello, good morning. I didn't think there was anything wrong with the Aboriginal Affairs Committee prior to the terms of reference being changed, particularly with membership of executive directors. And now that it's opened up to members of community at large, you know, the only issue I have is, you know, being an executive director of an Indigenous organization, you know, we're accountable to the organization. We're accountable to our board of directors. There are levels of accountability, whereas when you take community members at large as individuals, there's no mechanisms for accountability. So also, you know, being an executive director of an Indigenous organization, we have a lot of interface with the city, you know, the various divisions of the city, sometimes with, you know, City Hall itself. And, you know, we have vested interest in making sure that, you know, there is dialogue between Indigenous community through our organizations with the city. And so I'm highly disappointed with this change of the terms of reference that recently happened. And I don't see this as improving the Aboriginal Affairs Committee. And I'm really disappointed with it. I won't be applying for the next iteration of this committee. So I'll be gone. Probably won't allow access either for consultation with the organization which I work, because it's highly disappointing. I've realized this is not for Indigenous by Indigenous committee. This is a committee comprised of Indigenous folks, but the really ones that call the shots are the non-Indigenous folks on City Hall and City Council, as well as the clerks, as well as the staffers. So it's not really empowering. It's not really practicing Indigenous sovereignty or self-determination. If anything, it's a step away from that. So I won't be signing up to join again, and I'm just really disappointed. And for the folks that made deputations, you did a good job. And I know it is a competitive process applying for these committees. And I wish you success in your applications. I recently applied for the Indigenous seat with the Heritage Committee, the city's Heritage Committee, and I was really disappointed when I was interviewed, because I was interviewed by two non-Indigenous folks. They really weren't clear on what qualities they were looking for in individuals. And I thought, well, heritage, Namir has plans the biggest powwow in the city. We do a lot of cultural and heritage stuff. I thought it'd be a shoe-in, but didn't get in. I think you need to look at the terms of reference for that group, or groups that have Indigenous seats on other committees, because it doesn't seem right when there's non-Indigenous folks deciding who should get the Indigenous seats. So anyway, that's all the comments I have on this.
Thanks, Steve. Are there other questions? Francis?
Yeah, I have a comment. Thank you, Matthew, for bringing all these options forward. And I have to thank the speakers to the agenda item, and I thank Suzanne for trying to clear up exactly who are we. After 25 years, you think I'd know who I was. I still question. And Steve, thank you. I understand exactly where you're coming from. But the selection and interviews of candidates, these are selected by people who don't serve on this committee, who have no idea what we do, who we are, or have any interactions with us. And they select them, identify them, select them, and then parachute them into the seats that are vacant. I would really like to see all the candidates that apply present at an AAAC meeting. They can sit there and say, you tell us what they have to offer, what experiences they have, what qualities they bring, how they have interacted with the community and with the city, and how they're going to benefit what we do. And then the AAC members could rank them. If there's 10 of them, not that there's ever going to be 10, but if there's 10 of them, you go from 10 to 1. And that would be how we would rank them, how we would put our vote forward. I mean, what you're doing is that you're asking the Conservatives to put forward the Liberal candidates, is exactly what you're doing. You're asking people that are not part of this committee to tell us who is going to be part of this committee. And I find that a little offensive. So if there's any way that we can choose who should be sitting, what qualities we're looking for. Suppose we're looking for someone in the health field, or someone in the education field, we'd be able to look for those type of candidates who would fill out our circle. So I just yeah, I'm kind of opposed to some of the options that we have.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Questions? Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you very much, Pamela. As one of the only non-Indigenous members on the committee and someone who quite welcomed some of the changes as it was an attempt to respond to the voices of community to bring more community members in. I'm more than a little confused as to how we go forward from here, because I think if this is the feeling that's coming from many of the long-term members, I think we have a real problem. Because I think you've all done a heck of a lot of good in advancing many of the issues that we've been able to advance in the last 5 years, and losing those voices is I think would not be a positive path forward and not help us maintain reconciliation and Indigenous issues on the top of the city manager's agenda, which is why I'm a little confused and looking for advice about what could be changed. And I got it just in response to Francis's point. I think the reason why it's come up this way is because that's what we know, right? Like that's what the city knows, because it's how we appoint everyone to every advisory committee and many of our boards and agencies. We go through an interview we do an open call, we go through an interview process. Their folks are ranked based on their skills, and then they're interviewed and selected. Some by council, some not by council. It's what we know. I think the challenge in Francis, and please, I beg your Paul. I don't mean to complicate things with what you're suggesting, because I think having the committee review new members has a lot of merit. What the challenge would be at the changes of committee, because every 4 years, all of you have been appointed at that changeover of the elected council when we reappoint those committees. So that first selection process would be a challenge, because there would be no committee to do the selection process unless for some reason there was some carryover into the new term, which is, we do have precedent for that on some of our other divisions where there are staggered appointments, so that you never end up in a position where you don't have members that could do the reappointments. Maybe there's some value there. I don't know, and I am not prepared, quite frankly. I would feel very uncomfortable. I would not be prepared to put forward any resolutions that would bind this committee to any position. But I do think there may be merit in at least having, and it's critical that it happens, I think, before the next term of council, because it will set the stage for whatever this committee becomes. And I appreciate Steve's point that it does need to be not necessarily made by the city and imposed on the Indigenous community. It needs to have more and deeper engagement than that. I'm just not I'm not proposing solutions here, but a commitment to try to figure out what those solutions might look like. And I just think we should try to fix this if there is a possibility of fixing it. Maybe there's a solution with as Francis suggested, having the committees more actively involved in both the recruitment process as well as the interview process and putting those names forward. There are often opportunities, or they have been opportunities, for the executive directors of divisions to be involved in a sort of a not quite a hands-off way, but been involved in some form in the selection of new members for the committees for which they serve, just to give advice to the selection committee about what skills would exist. Maybe there's an option there. I guess my biggest highlight would be like hearing that some of these voices that have been with us for so long might be lost or unhappy with the new composition is distresses me to no end, partly because I really have valued your voices here, and I want to make sure that opportunity continues. So I'll leave it at that, but maybe there's more of an opportunity to have a deeper dive as these last couple meetings play out in order for us to resolve some of these of these concerns. Thank you.
Francis, and then
Yeah.
Cynthia.
I'm not saying do not take people who are not executive directors, because there are some very qualified people who are not sitting as executive directors of Indigenous organizations. What I'm doing is I'm amplifying what Steve has said, in that the executive directors who sit around this table bring great value to the city of Toronto. We have eyes and ears that the city does not have. We have the ability to know what the city doesn't know. So how many seats do we have available? We don't have enough executive directors, but I would say that there is the ability to have the executive directors hold down the majority of the seats because of the value that they bring and who they are, and parachute in one or two others who are not executive directors, because number one, how else are they going to learn? How else are they going to be involved with the workings of the city? But I mean, like, if Steve and there are others who have voiced their desire to walk away, or who are talking about it, what you're going to end up with is, if you have 20 seats, you're going to have 20 individuals who have no ties to any organizations, who are not representing any group of people, and who are there with their own agendas to fill. And that's going to be chaos. So I don't mind with vacancies of 1 or 2 spots, but I think the majority of the spaces should be filled by members, executive directors.
Thank you, Francis. Cynthia?
Miigwech Suzanne for that prayer, and miigwech to the community speakers that spoke out. As a new member, I do have a couple of questions, and some of the questions have been answered throughout the discussions here. I did not realize that it was executive director heavy, but my question then would be, why is there a term within the terms of reference for 4 years if we're all, executive directors? I like the idea that Fran had mentioned about opening a couple of seats to community members. I don't know how many seats are available. I think it's 24. I could be wrong, but maybe making that about maybe 5 community members and the rest executive directors. I also wanted to see or ask the question about previous applicants. Would they ever be reconsidered, or they have to reapply when a seat becomes vacant throughout the term? Also, I don't know if this is more too colonial as a suggestion, is that perhaps, so if we're saying people make a final decision at the city council level, then wouldn't it just be a shoo-in that all of the executive directors from the Indigenous organizations be elected on this committee? So there's that question also. So why is there even a process? You would just basically reach out to them and say there's a seat available, and you as an executive director would be invited to come and sit here at this table. So I don't know why there's a process there again. So there seems to be a little confusion as a new member for myself. I sincerely thought it was open to individuals who were interested in sitting on this advisory committee. So I am a little confused here, but I'm slowly understanding the history of this committee and how it does its selection processes. But when I was saying if this is too colonial to vote, is if it is now not just executive directors, perhaps if there's a term like city council does themselves, and then they get votes. And so maybe the community itself, we create a system where the community votes on the people who sit on this committee. So kind of like an election. And so everybody has the opportunity to say, hi, my name is Cynthia Bell Clayton. This is what I could bring to the committee. And then you have a process where you vote in community members, executive directors, or people who fit the criteria for the committee is what I'm suggesting. Miigwech.
Thank you, Cynthia. I don't know if staff wanted to answer or comment on any of our questions before I move to Ruth.
I'm happy to do that through the chair. Thank you for those questions. Regards to the applications, so yes, when people apply, we do keep the applications on file. Typically, we keep them active in our system for 2 years. So for the recent round of appointments in the fall, we had a number of new applications that came in, and we also had applications that had been received going back a while from other people before the terms of reference had changed, but people who were still interested in joining the committee. And so all of those applications were considered as part of that process in the fall. There were about, I don't remember the exact number, I think there were around 50 applications in total that were looked at. So, and leading up to that process, what we did is contacted people who had applied in the past and said, hi, you've applied in the past. As you may know, there are some seats that are now under consideration. Are you still interested? So we touched base with everyone who had applied in the past. I think Brendan can answer the question about why there's a term and what that length of term is and why. So I'll pass that to Brendan to answer that question.
Hello, just very quickly, the length of term is actually set by council because it's the length of term of council, because it's a body, a council advisory body. When council is dissolved, all council's subsequent bodies are also dissolved. So it can't exceed the length of term of council.
So then it's just a reappointment, right? Reapply and get appointed if the terms of reference is only executive directors on this committee.
It's technically council has to constitute new bodies because they all dissolve, so they don't exist anymore. So council, when a new council is created, the report comes forward and it has to decide what advisory bodies it's going to create. Once those advisory bodies are created, then yes, the appointment process would occur. So everybody would be free to be appointed. Matthew can correct me, but I believe there are some constraints about successive appointments. I think there might be an 8-year constraint or not, but Matthew can correct me on that.
Yes, for when people are representing organizations, there isn't a limit on the number of times that people are reappointed. So the mix of the committee right now is sort of a unique model. And so there are members who have been on the committee for many years and representing those organizations and engaging in that way. So the appointments process in the past, again, before the terms of reference changed, would be staff from Indigenous Affairs Office reaching out to those organizations and saying, hey, council has reconstituted or recreated this committee again for this term. Are you interested in taking part again and doing things that way? So I hope that answers the question. And then going forward again, if the terms of reference change, or if the public appointments process changes, or if there's a decision about, well, it should be X number of seats reserved for people from organizations and X number of seats reserved for members of the public or whatever, then again, we would sort of follow that lead and adapt to whatever is necessary to kind of fill those seats and do that outreach and do that, fulfill that process.
Ruth?
Thank you, Sago. I just also I know the Constitution discussion is focusing on executive directors. I'd also like to remind or hope that we can engage and include and continue to include those of us that are in educational institutions, as I know my colleagues at the TDSB, as well as other universities and colleges, have also participated as educators and activists to support, hopefully, you having Indigenous employees at your institutions, at your organizations. So when we look at this space, I hope that those of us who provide some of your training or trained bodies come forward, especially those of us teaching social workers. Yeah, I just want to keep us also participating in that conversation.
I see Jeff and then Steve.
Or I don't know how to raise my little hand. I just really want to second what Ruth said. I think that our committee is much stronger when we have representation from post-secondaries. I also think it's the same when we think about the healthcare sector. We've talked in the past about the business sector. I mean, the Indigenous approach is a holistic one. Yes, executive directors in the social service agency are important, but I think we can also think of educational institutions and other institutions as occupying a similar space in bringing important knowledge to the table. And so how we define that, I think, is up to the circle here. But I just want to second what Ruth said around that. Miigwech.
And thanks, Jeff. I want to echo Jeff's comments as well. I realized after saying just executive directors that I forgot our friends from the various institutions. And that's also inclusive of the universities, colleges, TDSB, any other similar like institutions. Those are equally important. And I know they also sit on other committees outside of this table as equals with some of the executive directors. So that's crucially important that they also get included. The other thing is, it's really unfortunate that the Aboriginal Affairs Committee couldn't maybe set up a subcommittee to maybe tackle the terms of reference ourselves in a for Indigenous by Indigenous approach. But I know the terms of reference have something along the lines that we can't have an official Aboriginal Affairs Committee meeting unless we're convened upon within the prescribed timeframes when meetings occur. So it's too bad there wasn't a provision to have a subcommittee. So maybe a few of the interested members could, look at the terms of reference and craft something that might work better for all or probably even most of us. So it's unfortunate. I know that these terms of reference and crafting them, they take time. It takes a lot of heads around the table. It takes lots of consensus building. And, unfortunately, we've never had that option in crafting this. So disappointed over that.
Thanks, Steve. And the terms of reference is our next item where it is just sort of an open discussion. We have one registered speaker, so we can explore that more because I know we've discussed it as a table a few times. And I just wanted to make a few comments, and Francis, I see you, around some of the things that were said. And I'm hearing a lot of balance between the city and Indigenous governance. And I think with the reconciliation plan that was recently approved, we're at a place now where the city has committed to Indigenous leadership and in its truest form. And so I think that this is the opportunity to have this sort of two-row design of our table that's ours, created by us, and that although the topics discussed here have been contentious and that this process has been exhaustive, I want to highlight that it's also, in my mind, a very optimistic sort of horizon, because I think that what we're doing is we're pushing the envelope to make space that's ours, and that we're actually going to be able to form something that reflects us as a community and as a table. And when we speak about academics and executive directors and community members and health providers, I hear what we're doing is trying to find a balance between creating a bundle of unique gifts from our community, and as opposed to seeing individuals as roles and titles, that we need to look at one another for our unique gifts and what are we going to bring to this table and its ultimate purpose. And so with that, and maybe you can answer this for me, Matthew, after Frances shares her comments, but just some clear next steps. And is that a subcommittee process, as Steve mentioned, some clear steps around what can we do now, today, after this meeting, in this meeting, to make some of these changes, because there's been a lot of suggestions and a lot of brainstorming thus far. But I'll let Frances go ahead, and then perhaps you can answer that question for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Pamela. You said it so well. I just want to say that when I was speaking previously, I did say executive directors and I did say members from education and health and any other sector that has not high profile, but I guess passionate members who would represent a segment of the community that is not being represented now. So I did include, because I know how valuable the education and the health and financial, if there's any, financial, always good to have money at the table. So these things are all important. And I also heard, and Matthew and Michael mentioned it, the unique position that the Aboriginal Affairs Committee holds with the City of Toronto. Well, if we are so unique, let us make our own rules. We have an understanding, like a guiding principles that we signed with the City of Toronto. And so why is this not being recognized by allowing us to meet when we want to meet or when we can meet, not at a prescribed time, but at a time that is convenient to what we're doing and what the calendar says. We do hold a unique position in the City of Toronto. We've been identified as being unique with the City of Toronto. So show us that you believe we are unique with the City of Toronto. That's it.
I'd like to just make a point around the committees dissolving. I feel like that language is concerning in the sense of who we are as a community and the history that we carry. I think that the dissolving of our people in our community is concerning. And so, maybe examining that this table doesn't dissolve at a certain point in time, but there's sort of a ongoing recruitment process to fill seats or something. Anyhow, thank you, Francis, for
Remember,
your comments.
Pamela, they can't wipe us out. We're still here.
We're still here. It's true. Thank you. So just around next steps, if there are some clear next steps that the table can consider and the members can sort of consider to move us forward.
Thank you, Pamela. That's a question then for me, I think. So I will say, this discussion, I can see that this discussion is also, of course, tied very closely with what is technically the next agenda item about terms of reference, but obviously the two are very interrelated. So I recognize that. I would say just in terms of the part that I've presented on today in terms of options for the process. So, the report lays out some ideas, and as I've said, that's not all the things that could be considered, but those are some ideas. I think from a staff perspective, if this committee is interested in, moving any motions to say, it could be today or it could be at the next meeting to sort of signal direction in terms of parts of the process that they would like staff to pursue for the next term in terms of a different type of selection committee. And there were some ideas discussed over the past few minutes about who would be involved or how people would be involved. If any direction like that, I think would be helpful for us as we look ahead to next term. In terms of things about the terms of reference, next steps on that, I would probably say that Brendan, again, from the city manager's office, would probably be better to answer that. It might fall into the next agenda item. Again, I recognize the relationship between the two here. So I think he could probably answer some more or give some more insight into what the next steps with that would be. But I would say just in terms of the public appointments process that my team's responsible for, if there are things that members would like to see, then yes, of course, the committee can move motions on that, and that's helpful. And also, our office is always open to feedback. It doesn't have to be strictly through this meeting. People can call us or email us or anything like that with other suggestions or questions. We're always reachable. So getting direction from the committee is helpful, but if individuals have other things they want to share or discuss, then you can always reach us individually as well. I'm happy to do that. I hope that helps answer some of your questions.
Yes, thank you. And Brendan, I saw that you put your camera on. If it's okay to let you respond in the next item, because we do have a registered speaker. Thank you. Are there any other folks who want to make comments or add questions on this item? Councillor Layton?
Just very quickly, and this may actually be to Brendan. There are, I believe, some not advisory committees, but some boards that have longevity past the term of council. I'm thinking the Toronto Atmospheric Fund, the Toronto Police Services Board. Is something legislatively different in those? They both have pieces of legislation that set them up. I will acknowledge that. They also have other people selecting the individuals, some of those individuals, not TAF, but the Police Services Board. What's the difference? Why can't we have this one exist past the term of council?
Through the chair, you are correct, Councillor. There are boards, as you say, like Police Services Board, TAF, TTC would be another one. It's some of those are because they do have specific provincial legislation that has established them. Some of those also have provisions that when council's appointing those members, they do appoint them until a successor is chosen. So those members do sit acknowledging that those boards exist beyond the term of council because they're administrative. They have oversight responsibilities for service provision for organization. They sit as a formal board with services reporting to them. The council advisory bodies, because they are purely a creation of council, must dissolve with the dissolution of council at the end of its term, as with everything that council creates. It can't extend beyond it. Those bodies that you cited are not sort of purely creations of council. So they're not constrained in the same way.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. That's all.
Any other questions, speakers? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to receive this item? Suzanne, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Fantastic. All right, so our next item is 17.4, the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. So we have one registered speaker, Tiffany. So Tiffany, if you are ready, you have 5 minutes on the clock.
Is just a question before I begin, is there not a presentation on this item?
There isn't a presentation on this item. It's just an open discussion with the committee members, and the speakers go first.
Okay. Miigwech, thank you for clarifying. Ani again, committee members, thank you for the valued conversations at the last agenda item. I would also like to share that not only am I speaking for community, I speak for this great dream that I have, which is to ensure that no Indigenous child is left behind. I also have a dream when I came to the committee a couple years ago, was to create a nonprofit too. I feel that I do have the qualifications, skills, transferable skills, to be a great executive committee, like a lot of you that I honor in these positions. I always kind of wondered why it was that there was no opportunities to be mentored or to be guided, especially considering I have so much value. And this is not just for me, this is really for my community. I'm only one person and I can't speak for everybody, but I sure do care deeply about my community. And I want to really say, Chimigwech, like from the bottom of my heart for everybody for basically, unfortunately, making me feel kind of rejected and not included. And it was actually quite inspiring because I didn't know anything about terms of references. I didn't know anything about advisory committees. And now I'm like really inspired because I'm gaining so many transferable skills just by being here and coming back to these committees. I've really improved in my public speaking. I've learned a lot more about systems and how they hold hands with other systems. And honestly, I really can't thank you enough for inspiring me because sometimes when you're oppressed, it really inspires you to make some changes. And so I'm really excited because I had the honor, I got nominated to be on a committee, non-Indigenous, and I'm feeling really proud and honored to be included. And from that opportunity, next thing you know, I'm on some other committees as well. And I would very much like to shout out the Parkdale area because that's my home. And I'm really excited when we got the mental health crisis response project from Two Spirited, because I'm on that committee too. And I'm the team lead and I'm really proud and I'm really excited because, you know, our community is really important. And so when we talk about these terms of references, I don't know a lot about it, but I do know when I'm on these different committees, the terms of references kind of change. And at the same time, I'm a valued person. When I go to these other advisory committees, I feel so good inside. They make me feel so appreciated, valued, included. I'm not too sure why there's this disarray of not wanting a valued person like myself, a person who advocates so hard, harder beyond any type of levels. I speak to people in the city. I'm speaking to different types of ministries, and I'm also ensuring that our families can stay together, be strong, and thrive. And I'm not too sure why the terms of reference can't include um, that all community members who have gifts and wisdom to share and have something valuable can be included. I would like to make a recommendation that the terms of references include some type of subcommittee, which would be a community engagement advisory. Or perhaps that committee can include 5 elders, aunties, community members, including youth. And I'm really excited about my journey. And I reach out to all of you EDs and ask you to help me. I want to form a nonprofit to address a lot more than what we're doing. And so that's why I come here, because these gaps that a lot of our community can swim through are not being addressed. And that's why I come here. And so I'm asking that the terms of reference can really be looked at in a more thorough way to be mentoring, sharing, inspiring. I shouldn't be learning this from non-Indigenous peoples. I should be learning this from my community. I also want to be empowered and inspired and influential. And I honestly feel like one day, hopefully we will all come together and say, you know what, Tiffany, I'm really sorry. I gave you such a hard time because you have so much gifts and so much value to this community. And we're sorry, you know, and repair that email that I sent to Selena saying, you know, I want to repair. You know, we don't do that a lot. We don't want to repair. We want to create a lot of fractures, a lot of hurt and pain. And I feel that this terms of reference would really be incredible to include community, to make sure that we are included. Like the mayor said, nothing about us without us.
That's 5 minutes.
And I'm valued. Thank you very much for speaking. I didn't hear a lot of the committees, the new members, but I'm really proud to be here. I'll see you the next meeting and the next one. Miigwech.
Thank you. So for this item, does anyone have any questions for Tiffany? Sorry, before we go on. Okay, seeing none for this item.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
Just, I know the terms of reference were kind of changed, or maybe I wasn't at the table when they were discussed, but is the idea for this agenda item to, again, go through a process of changing the terms of reference without committee members having a say in it? What is the intent for this agenda item?
So this item was for just open discussion around the terms of reference. If there's motions to be made, they can be submitted in writing from members at the table. And because staff are in the room, you can ask questions about process and anything else because Brendan is here.
Okay. No,
so I'd like to open.
I would like to, thanks for clarifying that. I'd like to suggest that there at least be some form of subcommittee formed with existing committee members to help guide the changes of the terms of reference. That's what I would suggest. You know, I've been on this committee for what, 3 terms now, and others have been on longer than me. You know, we kind of know how it works. Still learning along the way, but yeah, it's helpful when we have a say on the terms of reference for the actual committee we sit on. I think it's counterproductive when the terms of reference change without proper dialogue, and that's where my source of frustration comes from. And you know, another way, in retrospect, looking at those vacant seats could have been maybe, you know, instead of the requirement of 25 seats being filled, just reducing the number of seats for the committee. You know, that could have been debated. There could have been a dialogue on it. You know, we could have put other provisions in there, but I know for myself, I never had that opportunity to have dialogue or discussion on it. It just happened, and you know, it's highly frustrating when you don't have a say in it. So yeah, that's what I'm advocating for.
Are there other questions or comments?
I'd like to make a comment.
Hi, Patty.
My ceiling, I'm sorry about that, but it's the way my computer's set up. Yeah, and first I want to apologize for being late. I did a 5-hour drive this morning to get here, and I left at 4:45 where I was at, so I got on as soon as I got home. I just want to, well, I want to echo what Steve has said, and I also want to thank Tiffany. I know, I do know from my experience with Tiffany, she does sit on some important committees and boards, and she is a valued member of the community. And I think that we need to take to heart what she said, whether that means forming a subcommittee of community members. But I think we need to really listen to what she said, because what she has said is very valid. And I think we need to hear her. So that's my comment.
Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll echo that praise of our chair. I think I think our chairs in the past couple of meetings have done a remarkable job keeping us focused on the task, and I thank them deeply, including for their work around the Reconciliation Action Plan and ensuring it pointed directly to the need for it to be a constant, evolving and document that engages with community. I just wanted to point out, so I remember, I think it was last August when the original changes came forward that were in a report to the committee, and as part of that, one of the recommendations was for us to continue a dialogue with committee members about revising the process and the going into the next term. And so we do have an opportunity here. That's why they're on the agenda, for us to continuously give our feedback. I think another option, if I may, and I really hate to put more work onto our chair, but in order for us to break the constraints of the committee system that we have set up, there's an opportunity for us to either strike a subcommittee, but although that in and of itself also then requires a secretariat and is I think the same level of formality as this committee. It's that or request that our chair, given I think a lot of us have a deep respect for the chair, to work with the city manager's office and the IAO to engage members of this committee about what changes, including the new membership, about what changes and how we might bring forward a new sort of framework for this committee, a new terms of reference for the upcoming term, both the selection and the composition of the committee. We have an opportunity to maybe do that in the next couple of months before before we enter an election period and we don't have any more meetings until the following term. Maybe that's something that we can put forward here to keep that dialogue going outside of just these meetings, because I like it's terribly difficult to arrive at consensus when we're all on little boxes on each other's screens and given the time constraint of our long meetings. So maybe that's something that put a bit of faith into the support system around the chair and in an active engagement with all of you. I would even say maybe that includes past chairs. Maybe that's a way of us sharing some of the workload and some of the insight that the past chairs get, do some consultation along with the support of the IAO and the city manager's office as they seem to be the ones that have a wealth of knowledge about this, and engage the community both on these calls and what we've heard from the wider community, and then perhaps bring something back a little bit more formally for our discussion at what will either be our final meeting or close to our final meeting. Maybe that's a path forward that we can all have some faith in, that we will have our voices heard and not be constrained by this very rigid process that's set up through the existing terms of reference and the city.
That's great. Any other comments on that question? Okay, I'm seeing none. Francis, and then I think Brandon, you were going to reply.
Yeah. I like the idea of us deciding, taking apart, deconstructing what currently is the terms of reference. But I think it has to come from us. It cannot come from the city. So the IAO and the city manager's office could be informed after we've made our decision on what we'd like to see happen, what changes we'd like to see. If you're putting the city at the table with us, it's just like we're being monitored by the city. And we're trying to put this together as a document that would serve us, the community, and benefit the city. I'd like to see it developed first by the Aboriginal Affairs Consultative Committee, or the AAAC, and then take it back. I just don't see the city sitting there at the table and monitoring what we're doing.
If I may, my apologies. I didn't intend for there to be a monitoring exercise. My reason for having their involvement is to resource it, rather than anything else. To give, just because I didn't want to put any additional work on the good volunteers that are on this call. I'm happy if it's conversations that you have that you have directly with other members. But I think I would just like you to have the resources to do it however you choose to. That was just my intent, Francis. So my apologies. That I see how it was certainly could be misconstrued.
Thank you.
Brendan, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. And thank you all. This is actually very informative because we're actually working right now in our phase to gather input and gather feedback. As you know, a number of the advisory bodies are moving towards the end of this council term and sort of, I don't want to say wrapping up, it's more providing their best advice and and sort of working towards their work plans culminations in many cases. And what we tend to do at the end of the terms with the advisory bodies is reach out to them and try to understand from them what to gather the most feedback, to understand from them not only what they found worked well and what their best advice is to council, but also you know, what they might improve, what advice they would give going forward around the areas they worked on, and also around their processes themselves. We will be shortly distributing. We do this with individual surveys to all the members, both past and present generally. And we go through the chairs, and so we also invite all the advisory bodies to, if they choose to provide any insight or any submissions to us through the city manager's office or through their various support and policy supports. In this case, it would be the IAO, to provide any documents or motions or recommendations. They can do that as well. Should they consult with the members of the community or people that they're representing at the advisory bodies? We also really encourage people to submit that feedback as well. We really do want towards the end of term to know what they would like to see going forward, because this all helps inform what will come for the next term of council. We want to bring that best advice, and we want to do the best going forward. And certainly this is a collaborative process. We do want to underscore that. This is not a process of, you know, thank you, good night. This is a process of trying to understand what we can do to expand and improve on our relationships for future council. You know, because we can't say what the next council will do at this point. That is at the discretion of next council, but we want to be sure that we're providing the best advice and the best options for them. And again, I would underscore, as with all advisory bodies, that whatever comes forward, it is a two-way relationship, and it is an ongoing dialogue with council. And as such, that's something that can always be advised that, you know, well, we didn't quite get it right, we need to change this, or, you know, we feel this needs to be adjusted. And I would underscore, especially with the AAC, that is certainly an active dialogue that we encourage. And we feel sort of with the RAP and others, that is something that the city embraces. So respectfully, I'll leave it there respectfully, but certainly if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you for those reflections. Francis, and then Cynthia.
I can't emphasize strong enough, Brendan, that your department, who is going to be looking at what we propose to change, are fully educated on Indigenous history, number one, who understand and have read and understand the changes that should be made, the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, and understand that the city is behind the Reconciliation Action Plan, and this will have a direct impact on what we're going to be proposing and what you should be accepting, and that we hold a unique position in the City of Toronto, and particularly with City Hall, that sets us apart from the rules and regulations that are currently in place for the rest of the settlers, immigrants, people of color, give them any title you want. But that sets us apart and puts us in a very unique position. And so your department, the people who are going to be looking at this, will have to know how to massage our requests into a viable document.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Sorry, Cynthia.
Wedge friend, kind of what I was going to say too. I think too, what Steve was talking about is allowing us to deliberate on our own terms of reference gives us an opportunity to be off camera and to have really in-depth conversations about some of the current terms that are in there, and to have a challenging discussion amongst our peers too. It's like, just because one of us says something, the other wants to have a conversation to maybe get on that same level of understanding. So giving us, I guess, that space to have that discussion, to be able to allow each other to, again, learn from each other, to debate, and then to, even at some point, we could explain to the city why certain pieces of the terms of reference does not fit with our people. So it's an opportunity to also educate the city, to say this is why this does not fit with us. And so sometimes, even when we think about it, like when I'm thinking about how executive directors, educators, and health people who sit at this table, we are all answerable to somebody. And sometimes maybe what I have to say will be left in that space where we can have that discussion. So that's what I'm saying, is like, some things I feel I can't bring up with you all in the room. And I feel that there needs to be a room where we can be able to deliberate. So I want to say I support what Steve has recommended in Fran, to have that space to be able to deconstruct and reconstruct the terms of reference based on the individuals in this room. Miigwech.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Oh, sorry, Larry.
I'm sorry, it's Larry here. I echo what everybody has said, and the speakers also. The only clarification I need, I've always wanted clarification, as we meet there at the table, well, quarterly because of the COVID, and we used to meet monthly. Our voices from that table, where do they go, Mike? I guess the question is to Mike. Does this go through you as our councillor lead to the council, to City Toronto? And where does our information go to? Or does it go to the IAO office now? Or I'm not quite clear. Can you give us a little bit of clarification on that, please? Thank you.
I'm sorry, was that to me, Larry?
Yeah, I was, because you are our counselor on our committee. I just want a clarification. Where is our voice when we bring our wants and needs from our advisory council? Where does that go? How does the council receive that?
So they directly go to the executive committee.
Okay.
And then when what comes out of executive committee isn't reflective of this committee's position, it's typically been my practice to try to right that ship when we hit council, if I'm able to.
Yeah, because I just wondered, because we're all at the table, well, it was monthly, and I wonder where our voices are heard. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. And my apologies, I was on a call with a media outlet.
Anyone else? Tristan?
Yes, just first off, just want to thank everybody for their comments this morning. I know for myself, I have yet to speak at this meetings, and as a young person coming into the space, it's coming in with a lot of learning and a lot of unlearning within the space. And I just want to thank the individuals that have been here much longer than myself. I've only been on here for about 5 months. But I just want to echo with what everybody has been saying in terms of your comments that are being provided. And as I sit here, one thing that is really coming back to myself is making sure that we are moving forward in that holistic approach and remembering all of our relations is how we reference in terms of how we come in this, how each of us are a gift in terms of this basket. And so as I kind of think of, this terms of reference, it's almost like weaving a basket in terms of the different material that we need to collect for that basket. And so I'm referencing all of each of you in your different positions. And for those of us that are working in those different sectors, I know for myself, working in the tech and innovation sector, it's a completely new sector as a young Indigenous person within the space. but this is also allowing myself to build community. And so I just want to echo with what Cynthia comments earlier in terms of moving into that space where us as individuals can have that meeting. But one of the things that I was coming into this this committee as well is that in the hopes that we would be bringing on more younger people within these spaces. Well, I know for myself, just being 25 years old, I think it's really important that we do start bringing us younger ones into these discussions. So not only for myself, but others can understand the work that each of you have brought forward today within our community of Toronto. But I just want to echo, those spaces and those individuals that are not able to be with us. I know myself, my grandfather, Roger Jones, was pretty significant here within the community of Toronto. And so for myself, it's really important that, I'm being mindful and respectful of our ancestors that, have created that ground for us and as we move forward. And so I just wanted to leave it at that. And I really look forward to our continued conversations today. And thank you so much. Just thank you, everybody. Migach.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and opening up space for younger voices and setting that example. I just wanted to confirm before we move on, Brendan. So after this term is done, we have one more meeting. You mentioned surveys and outreach to sort of get feedback on the terms and the committee. And so just confirming that that will happen to past members, these members. And if folks can consult with their communities to bring that feedback forward, that's going to take place once this committee table dissolves.
That will actually take place over the latter part of this term. So it's likely to actually start before the last meeting. And the surveys tend to be left open for an extended period so that people can respond, I just want to say at their discretion. We know not everybody immediately responds.
Okay, that's great, fantastic. And then I'll make a commitment to all the members of this table to reach out maybe in small groups individually or collectively to sort of brainstorm, strategize, and gather feedback, maybe draft something, take a look at the terms of reference together and try and get something that's well produced and productive based on all of your thoughts and feedback to give back to the city. And so you can look for those emails and or reach out to me directly. So I'll make that commitment to each of you today. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to receive this item? Larry, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Fantastic, the motion carries. So just before we move on to our next item, there is just a point of order. It is 11:30 and we still have quite a few agenda meetings. So typically we would break at 12:30 for lunch for 30 minutes and then carry on with the agenda. We do want to take this time, however, because I know some members have to leave, to take a poll of who is able to stay past the lunch hour or the lunch break to ensure that we will have quorum. Otherwise, we will start drafting the motions to defer the remaining items that will remain past the 12:30 time. So if you can please turn your camera on and maybe just give us a thumbs up if you're able to stay. If you cannot stay, please turn your camera off and then the clerks will count if we will have quorum and they will inform me and that will inform our next steps. Clerks, can you see everyone?
Chair, I
Yes.
can only see 6 members on the call. So that means you will lose quorum by the time after 12:30.
By 12:30. Okay, so we'll start drafting the motions to defer the items. We have an hour left and we'll try and get through as much as possible. So right to it, the next item is the data for equity strategy, development of the City of Toronto's Indigenous data governance framework. So we have Jessica Shirk, Indigenous Affairs Consultant, and Haune Shameko, Manager of Data for Equity Unit, People and Equity. So if you two are ready, please go ahead.
Miigwech, Pamela. I'm just going to pull up our slide deck, so bear with me. Thank you so much for having us here today. Oh, just kidding. 1 second. I still sometimes am new to this, but that's okay. Okay, let me know when you can see the screen.
Can see it.
Great, Miigwech, I appreciate it. Okay, awesome. So, Ani Bojo, Gawi Napaji Ninta Anishnabemsi, Nimki Mishenke Kwen Indishnikas, Aurora Inda. So, hello everyone. My name is Jessica Shirk. My pronouns are she and her, and I am mixed Anishinaabe and English settler with family on my mom's side from Wissahickon First Nation in Parry Sound. My name that was gifted to me in ceremony is Thunder Turtle Woman, and I currently live in Aurora, Ontario, and I am the Indigenous Affairs Consultant for the recently established Data for Equity Unit at the City of Toronto. And so while we're not able to gather in person, I still want to offer this tobacco that I have in my left hand for your guidance and your time and your knowledge shared. So Miigwech, we really appreciate it. So now I will pass the virtual mic to my manager, Haune, and our director, Yolande, so they can introduce themselves. Hello?
Jessica, looks like you're doing the whole thing.
Hi,
Jessica. I think Haone might be having some trouble getting on her mic, so maybe I think she was going to go next, but maybe I'll sort of give her a moment to sort out what may be happening technically. Thank you so much, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yolande. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Director of Equity and Human Rights at the city, fairly recently arrived in this role. And I've been working with Haone, Jessica, and lots of other talented folks in our section. I am Jamaican by birth, and I have had the privilege of learning, living, and working on the traditional territory of many nations for over 3 decades. I am currently located in Toronto, covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet with this table today.
Thank you, Yolande. Can you all hear me now? Good morning, AAAC members. My name is Haune, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm a first-generation settler of African descent from Botswana, where I was born and raised, and I currently lead the City of Toronto's Data for Equity Unit and work alongside both Jessica Shirk and our director, Yolande Davidson. I'm very grateful to be here today with all of you to share the work that we're leading at the City of Toronto.
All right, so thanks so much, Haone and Jessica. So just to set some context for everyone, Jessica will be taking us through, Jessica and Haone both will be taking us through aspects of the presentation, but just wanted to provide a bit of framing for the discussion that we're going to have. The purpose of today's presentation is really to provide an update on the development of the Data for Equity strategy, and specifically the principle of Indigenous data governance. This is a really critical and core part of the work that the team is doing. And this was last considered by the AAAC in August of 2020. So it's been some time since this conversation has come forward, and we're looking forward to carrying on with what was discussed before and having some new opportunities for dialogue. The Data for Equity strategy was passed by City Council in 2020, and since then a unit has been established, led by Haone and with Jessica leading our work on lots of things, but in particular Indigenous data governance. The unit was recently established as far as January 2022. So when I say recent, I really mean recent. And the Reconciliation Action Plan, as everyone knows, was adopted unanimously by City Council in April. And Indigenous data sovereignty is mentioned in the section on values and principles, specifically under decolonization and power shifting. So there's a lot of synergy between work happening at the city right now in this space and some of the objectives of data for equity and what our team is trying to do. The focus of the presentation really is going to be about an update on the early implementation work specific to Indigenous data government, what we've heard from initial dialogue and community engagement, and some of our proposed plans for establishing a First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Data Research Advisory Circle. So we're really looking forward to your feedback and perspectives on what we're doing at this point in time. The First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Circle's guidance and recommendations will support the development of an eventual Indigenous data governance framework. So we're also hoping for feedback from the table today on the role and structure of this circle and the approach to Indigenous data governance that we're thinking about and in terms of advice that we've received so far. Through this work, we're accountable to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to actions number 53I and 55, in addition to Articles 3 and 4 in the United Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. There are lots of amazing efforts across the city to advance reconciliation, and we're committed to doing our part to bridge the intent and impact gap. We're big believers in impact over intention, and harnessing the power of data to contribute to the self-determination of Indigenous peoples. So that's kind of where we're coming from today, and there will be hopefully lots to discuss and share perspectives on as we move forward. So at this point, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Haoni and Jessica.
Thank you, Yolanda. So to start us off, I think it's really important to articulate what the City of Toronto's Data for Equity strategy and team is about. And very simple terms, our mandate is to deliver on the city's commitment to collect and use data to make better decisions and to provide public service that will ultimately improve the lives of Toronto's diverse population. We currently work with city divisions and their staff, and we advise them on how they can collect and use data to understand who is accessing city programs, who is achieving what outcomes, and who is encountering service barriers so that we can develop targeted services that serve the needs of Torontonians based on who people are, where people live, and what resources people have in terms of their income, their education, and their employment levels. These are just some examples of the types of social demographic data that we work with in our research. I also want to highlight for all you members that this type of data collection is voluntary. In other words, our service users or residents have the ability to refuse to provide any personal information that they're not comfortable sharing, and it wouldn't impact the access to city services. As Yolanda has already mentioned, our work was born from the city's data for equity strategy, which was approved in 2020 by City Council, following extensive research and consultation, some of which involved many of you Indigenous leaders and experts who shared with us the importance of the city's partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities as a way of ensuring that the collection and use of Indigenous data is done in an ethical and respectful way. So I just want to provide some high-level updates on our journey to date. And so since the strategy has been approved, we've been working on a series of pilot projects to test and learn from the application of the data for equity strategy in different city and program contexts, from public health, children's services, community funding, and social services. One of our critical key priorities this year is to ensure that these pilots and other divisions at the city continue to embed the reconciliation and Indigenous data lens in all data research initiatives at the city. Jessica is going to walk us through some of our initial thinking of how we're approaching this work from an Indigenous data governance perspective to inform future work at the City of Toronto regarding data and research, starting, of course, with the FNIM Data Research Circle and the data governance framework that we will soon be developing. Our goal is to return to City Council early next year with an update on the outcomes of our work, the lessons that we've learned in this journey so far, and our plans to continue this work in partnership with all of you members of AAAC. So I'll just pass the virtual mic now to Jessica, who will take you through the city's approach to Indigenous data governance. Jessica?
Miigwech Haune. So in the next few slides, I'm going to give an overview of Indigenous data governance, our proposed roadmap, what we've heard from our initial community engagement, and wrap up our presentation with some discussion questions. So put simply, Indigenous data governance refers to how Indigenous data is collected, controlled, protected, used, and shared to benefit First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples' collective interests. We work with client divisions to ensure processes to use Indigenous data consider principles of Indigenous data governance, for example, the First Nations principles of OCAP, a tool to guide how First Nations data is to be collected, protected, used, and shared. So our work at the city specific to this component is the development of an Indigenous data governance framework. Secondly, community engagement and relationships. We recognize that this is a fundamental part of the approach to this work. The First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Data and Research Advisory Circle, which I'll share about more shortly, is one of the ways in which we're going to be facilitating continuous engagement with Indigenous communities. And last but not least, data sharing, and that refers to the idea that Indigenous data is shared with and used to benefit Indigenous communities and not to stigmatize, harm, or negatively impact them. So from January until April, our focus has been on community engagement to inform Indigenous communities about this work and plans for the future. We're wrapping up our first phase of engagement today. From May to August, we will be planning the kickoff of the FNIM Circle with support from an Indigenous consultant. Beginning in September, the consultant will work with the city to co-design the Indigenous data governance framework in collaboration with the Circle and Indigenous communities. This will be an ongoing project until 2023. The Circle will be established to provide advice and recommendations on how the city can develop an approach to Indigenous data governance. The Circle will also provide advice and feedback on Indigenous data and research initiatives tabled by city divisions and also connect city divisions with Indigenous partners for collaboration. The Circle will consist of up to 12 individuals from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, including 2 co-chairs. Members will be individuals and representatives from Indigenous organizations with demonstrated interest and expertise in at least one of the topics of Indigenous data governance, technology, privacy, academia, research, advocacy, community, and social services, or other relevant topics. So far, we have engaged almost 40 Indigenous organizations and experts to provide a status update on the early development of this work and gather recommendations on how to establish the FNIM Circle. We have additional planned engagements in the coming months as well. So our initial engagement has extended to municipal and provincial governments, academia, as well as Indigenous organizations across diverse sectors. Our full list of engagements is included in the presentation appendix. So here are some of the key themes based on what we've heard from our initial community engagement. We're advised to evaluate the city's internal policies to determine barriers and opportunities to implement an Indigenous data governance framework. We're also advised to consider how Indigenous data will be controlled, protected, shared, and by whom, so as not to negatively impact Indigenous communities, and simultaneously that it is used to benefit them as well. We receive recommendations to apply a distinctions-based approach to ensure that the unique identities and rights of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples are recognized. And then also, we heard that to include a pillar that recognizes the unique needs of urban Indigenous communities and priorities are related and how they're related to self-determination. And this is the feedback we've heard regarding our approach to community engagement and the structure and role of the FNIM Circle. So we were advised that the FNIM Circle should consist of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit individuals who hold diverse roles across various sectors. We see recommendations to employ a variety of communication strategies in order to be as inclusive as possible. We're also advised to ensure that elders and or knowledge keepers play a significant role in advising circle discussions via ceremony, use of medicines, and storytelling. What we have heard consistently is that significant time and commitment must be dedicated to relationship building and that Indigenous communities do not work on city timelines. Lastly, we're advised to engage with treaty partners and provincial territorial organizations. As we near the end of our presentation, we want to get your feedback and advice based on the following discussion questions. So how do you think members of the FNIM Circle should be selected? Are there any community members you recommend to be in the FNIM Circle? Which Indigenous consultant would you recommend to lead this work? Do you have any feedback on our approach to community engagement? And how would you recommend the city approach Indigenous data governance? This is also an opportunity to ask any questions you may have or provide any feedback. And I just want to say in advance, on behalf of Yolande, Haune, and myself, that we sincerely are appreciative and grateful for your time and knowledge shared, and just so glad to be in this space together today. So, Chimigwech. Also, just want to quickly mention, we will come back to provide updates as this work progresses. So, Miigwech.
Amazing. Thanks to each of you. We do have one registered speaker on this item, so they will speak and then we'll bring it back to the committee. So Tiffany, you are set to speak and you will have 5 minutes when you are ready.
Ani, bonjour, everybody again. I would like to say a huge Chimigwech for the presentation. I found it very informative, and I really like the direction of collecting data so that we can better understand where our community is at and the services that are going to best suit us. I wonder, because I think that it's really important to highlight when we talk about community engagement, I kind of sometimes seem to get left out. I've been involved in a lot of Indigenous agencies. We only have a handful, and I sometimes seem to be missing out on these engagement sessions. And so I'm just wondering, being a strong advocate and knowing that this Indigenous data research circle is going to include community. I would like to nominate myself for a seat because I'm a strong advocate. And I also noticed through my own research of my own, was trying to understand why the city of Toronto hasn't created any data in relation to Indigenous deaths. Now, I know, as with a lot of EDs, especially in the last couple of years, we've lost a lot of our community in all sorts of ways, whether it's Indigenous children in care, Indigenous employees that may have died, including houseless communities. And I felt very compelled when I reached out to the IO and I'm asking, like, do we track Indigenous deaths? I started a little group just trying to track. And I really want to acknowledge the homeless memorial that happens at Trinity Square once a month, because that's the only place I would know if our, well, also on Facebook, but like it's so disheartening to go to this Facebook and I'm learning about our community members passing. It's really sad. And so I feel that capturing Indigenous deaths as data, perhaps really looking back at that in perhaps like a 10-year frame, I think is very valuable moving forward when we're trying to understand the true determinants of health, and what our community is really needing and deserved in relation to city services, whether that's housing, childcare, or whatever services that the city funds. And so with that, I would just like to say, Miigwech, I'm really looking forward to learning more about data, specifically Indigenous data research. And again, I would just like to recommend myself to be on that circle, and to really recommend that the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Council Committee would make a recommendation to support Indigenous deaths being really important discussion that should be highlighted. And thank you again. Miigwech.
Thank you, Tiffany. Does anyone have questions for Tiffany? Okay, seeing none, then we will move it to the members to ask questions of the presenters. And I see Ruth, go ahead.
First off, Sego, Jessica, it's beautiful to see you, child. And I say child only because you know how I feel about my Indigenous students I've been engaged with throughout my career. So it's beautiful to see you. I would love to participate. I know that you did ask me, sent me an email, and I was down with COVID. So I just want to say thank you for doing this work. This is important work for community, and I just want to acknowledge that it's really important that we have Indigenous data that is gathered and cared for and kept by Indigenous community. And so I want to say Nyao Goa and say we'll talk soon, okay?
Thank you, Ruth. Francis?
Yeah, I want to thank this team for bringing this equity and Indigenous data governance to us. I agree with Ruth. It's important to get intelligent numbers, intelligent data on the street, not something that's lumped in with something else and let's stick them in this column. I'm just looking at your page 14 and you talk about diverse membership. And FNIM Circle is representative of the diversity that exists within the urban Indigenous population in Toronto. And then you zip over to who to engage. Treaty partners, provincial territory, organizations. They look at things through it. They don't live here. They are not part of the City of Toronto. This should be City of Toronto centric. I see no reason why you would be going to reserves or going outside. You've got enough work to do here in the City of Toronto without creating wider strokes with your brush. Paint a picture of who's here in the city and not gather in those. They have a different lens. They look at things differently. They're able to do things differently. I think if you want to collect data on the City of Toronto, then do that. Collect data on the City of Toronto. Just a word to the wise.
Leonard?
Thank you for the presentation. It's really not the way I wanted to cut my teeth with this committee, but here goes. I work in healthcare, so I'm going to talk about data collection in healthcare and how that translates to Indigenous folks. Your first slide talked about race, age, abilities, gender, neighborhoods, and communities, and housing status. And to me, I equally applied that to social determinants of health. And when I think of social determinants of health, I think of how that puts First Nations, Inuit, Métis people in a deficit. So you can tell I'm not a very good fan of data collection. A couple of questions I have to ask is like, how is the asking being done? Is this being done by person, by survey? Is it anonymous? Is there a series of questions? Where is the data stored is very, very important. We've been data to death as Indigenous communities. And again, when I look at data translation, because I work in healthcare and I've seen how it works in healthcare and how it commutes, data transfers to racism and discrimination. I'm really concerned about that. And the other thing I have to say is, just a quick comment is that we have really been data to death as Indigenous communities. So just my thoughts.
Thank you, Leonard. Any other members? Tristan?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It's really great to see another, good to meet yourself, Jessica. Come from the same territory. So Shawana just kind of crossed the way there. But my question is, just as you shared the presentation and just with the comments that have been shared to date, one of the big things that I'm kind of facing within the tech and innovation sector is around data collection in particular and how it's done, or there's not really much frameworks out there. So for myself, just as the City of Toronto is now moving forward with the with this reconciliation journey ahead. I do understand that the City of Toronto also supports and funds special projects, initiatives, and fund other organizations. So I'm curious, with the proposed Indigenous data governance framework, are we going to be implying that when the City of Toronto funds organization A, B, and C, who A may not be quite familiar with working with the BIPOC community, to give them that support or to build that capacity? Because I know what we're beginning to see is we're beginning to see a lot of EDI positions start to come up within a lot of not within just the tech and innovation sector, but other sectors as well. So that's where I was just kind of wanted to frame my question in terms of that, is that are we looking at that any organizations that receive funding from the City of Toronto are to include and use the city's framework approach to Indigenous data governance? So that's my question. Thank you.
Are we allowed to answer? Okay.
Sorry,
This is my
I
first.
didn't know if you were
No,
trying to
no.
unmute.
No,
Go
I
for
was
it.
just I wasn't sure if I should wait for a motion or something, or okay, thank you. Thank you so much for all these comments and questions. Definitely a lot of these things are top of mind for us, and I know maybe you know, if there's anything that I missed out on, Haune and or Yolande can speak more to this afterwards. But in terms of the Indigenous data framework, governance framework, it hasn't, we're going to be hiring an Indigenous consultant to support co-designing the framework with the FNIM Circle and additional engagement that we'll be doing. And so we'll be narrowing the scope of how that, and so when we hear this feedback, it's really important to us because we can't, you know, give an affirmative yes or no whether or not that's going to take place. But if it's something that's really important to Indigenous communities in Toronto, then that's something that we'll definitely try to incorporate as best we can moving forward. So I think this is something that we'll take note of as we move forward with the you know, hiring of the consultant and establishing the FNIM Circle. And miigwech, Tiffany, for your interest in taking part in the FNIM Circle. I'll definitely try to find a way to contact you after we're and have a conversation with you. I apologize that we weren't in touch, but definitely want to meet you or meet you, however that works, and get to know more and share more about the opportunity as well. And Haune, is there anything else that you wanted to add, or Yolande?
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. I would just add a couple of things. So I definitely appreciate the comments made by everyone, including thinking about localizing and being really Toronto-centric in terms of our approach. I also heard about this type of data collection, sociodemographic data collection, being used as a tool to further oppress people and stigmatize. And so I think for us doing this work, that is a central principle in terms of building something that counteracts that or mitigates that as much as possible. And that is why we want this work. It's important for us to have this work be driven by community, by Indigenous communities and partners in a way that reflects ways of knowing and being that actually fit an Indigenous centered framework. And I think the challenge with a lot of sociodemographic data collection is that it isn't that. It's about pulling lots of information about different communities, especially communities that have been underserved and marginalized by systems in different ways, but it doesn't actually consider the implications of that and how those communities are then reflected in what that data says. And we saw a lot of that come out through COVID. I don't have to say to this table, you know, sort of what happened, but whatever level of data collection was going on, how those narratives were spun to demonize different communities in terms of COVID incidence rates and things like this. So it's very, I totally take the point that it's really powerful and can be used for good, but lots of bad stuff as well. And I think we recognize in the systems that exist, there is legitimate mistrust. Like these issues exist for a reason. Like people have experiences that are not just historical, they're still happening in health and education and social services and all kinds of different spaces. And so recognizing that and kind of calling that out, I think, is a really big piece of the work for us. And I don't have an answer right now in terms of storage, disclosure, like protocols and controls. So I think that's what we're trying to get to in a way that is framed and centered on Indigenous ways of knowing and being. But I also want to just touch on the question from Tristan about expectations for city-funded agencies. I think that's kind of, really where you were focused. Like, what do we think will be the role or the responsibility of folks who aren't in the city of Toronto proper, but are certainly being funded and resourced to serve lots of people who reside in Toronto, including Indigenous people and communities. That's an important consideration for us. I will say it's not in the context of Indigenous data governance at this time, but we do have a couple of pilot projects that have started out to sort of see what this looks like with divisions in the city that have a very significant service environment and client group, and what that interaction is like in terms of the funded agencies that they work with. And so we're at the very early stages of sort of understanding what that dynamic could be, and that's also going to inform anything that we are thinking about as far as roles, responsibilities, advice that we're going to get from the council, of course, and from lots of other people who we'll be speaking with. But that's also an important question because we are not necessarily always providing services as a government. It's really a lot of other people doing that on our behalf. And so I want to thank you for raising that as well.
Any follow-ups, questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll just make one comment just around data and Indigenous data, where it will live, who owns this information. I think most would agree it should be owned by the community. And there are bodies that are probably in position to care for that data and guide that data work. So just something to consider as we move forward. So if there are no further questions or comments, may I get a motion to receive this item? Steve, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Fantastic. Okay, so we are at a time of 12:09, 12:30 seems to be the cutoff. We don't want to rush through any of our guests' presentations, and we do have some motions to get through as from a business lens of getting stuff in order. I just wanted to touch base with Councillor Layton on your item. You did mention that it was not urgent, in which case it could be deferred. Just want to confirm that with you.
In the interest of time, like while contributions to the city's efforts of reconciliation is, I do and think, urgent. In this way, people won't get another bill to opt in for, I don't think, like 8 or 10 months. So it can wait.
Is it okay? Is it something that folks can review and email you directly some thoughts and feedback on if they want to?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So we have the clerks who are going to put up some motions that we need to vote on to defer items, and then another motion to accept some regrets from some members around the table, and then we will wrap up and you will be free.
One moment, Madam Chair, while we try to navigate through the system.
Thank you so much. Okay, folks, so the motion on your screen reads that we consider the consideration of items 17.6, 17.7, 17.8, 17.9, 17.10, 17.11, and 17.12 be deferred until June 13th, 2022, which is our next meeting of the Aboriginal Affairs Committee. Can I get a motion for that? I mean, all in favor? Any opposed? Great, the motion carries. So there should be one more motion.
Pamela, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does that mean that our next meeting is only going to be these items that we've deferred?
I unfortunately can't confirm that. And probably the answer is no. It is
Wow.
our last meeting together as a committee with Brian and I as co-chairs as well. And so if possible and folks are able to clear the afternoon, we may want to consider breaking for that 30 minutes as mentioned earlier and then reconvening after to get through as many items as possible. So I know that's difficult sometimes, but if you are able to, I think that would get as much done as possible in our last meeting.
Yeah, we'd have to block off the whole day
I
then.
think so.
Yeah.
Angus, go ahead.
I think if we're going to do that, can that be clear from the beginning, from the time that the invite is sent out and the agenda is sent out, that a larger block of time is anticipated?
Yes, I will work with the clerks to ensure that's clear in the calendar invite and all of the details that are sent out.
Because earlier I remember hearing something in the course of the discussion today about how some people weren't available to stick around in the afternoon in previous meetings. But the reason for that is simply that people book their times according to what they're told the time is going to take, and then they have other commitments that they have to adhere to. Otherwise, it shows a lack of respect for the people that they're supposed to meet with later in the afternoon. So I think if we all know in advance what the time constraints are, then we can book it accordingly.
Agreed. Thank you, Angus. Suzanne?
Yeah, I think there should be a communication as soon as possible to the members, as opposed to just a week before the meeting. If we could get notification, all of us, that the next meeting will be an all-day meeting, then the chances of having quorum for the entire day will be much higher. Thank you.
And I'll let the clerks respond if they'd like. I know that they work in some strict timelines as far as the agenda goes and the items. I know that at one point we did discuss limiting agenda items as a possibility, which wasn't an option. So could be something to look for as we sort of review the table. Clerks, I know you're very busy behind the scenes if you'd like to chime in. And Steve, I saw your hand.
Just waiting for the clerks.
I think you're fine, Steve.
Co-chair.
Okay.
I can confirm that as you have deferred the items to the next meeting, so there might be some more additional items to the next meeting, but we are happy to let you know ahead of the meeting of any. Well, I think for now we can be assured you that it will be a long meeting for in June, because that's that's the last scheduled meeting for this committee. So, but any information that we have, we can let you know prior to, as Member Suzanne said, prior to 1 week before the meeting schedule. Thank you.
Okay, so I was just wondering, is it safe to block off till 2:00, or should I block the entire day for scheduling that next meeting? Do we know? For now, I'll go with 2:00. Unless I hear otherwise, that's what I'll go with. Okay.
Thank you, Steve, for that question. But really, I'm not sure how it goes for the meeting. It also it also depends on the how the committee considers the items on the agenda, right? So it might be over before 12, or it might go beyond 12 o'clock and or even 2 in the afternoon. But yeah, so we have so right now we have deferred items. So deferred items will be automatically forwarded to the agenda for the next meeting. But as I mentioned, we may also get more agenda items for the next meeting.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So doesn't it also depend on the number of speakers? We could have a whole team of soccer players wanting to speak, you know, because there's the FIFA thing. So I mean, you could end up with whatever. So that's going to sort of skew the time. But Jonathan, don't we already have a date scheduled for the next meeting?
Yeah, it's June 13th.
Yeah, so
Yes,
everybody
that's
can
correct. Yes.
block that
June
day
13th
off.
is the next meeting for this committee.
Okay, I'll block off the entire day just for the sake of safety here. So yeah, all right.
For the sake of the soccer team.
Yeah.
Thank you in advance for all doing so. Nancy?
Yes, hi, Madam Chair. I just wanted to also, sorry, I'm going to introduce myself first of all. I'm Nancy Fiorentino. I'm also with the clerk's office here at the city. Jonathan did very well in explaining the requirement to have the time allotted for the next meeting. I do also want to add that included with that, we will have a lunch break if the meeting does go beyond 12:30. So just to let members know that, you know, perhaps blocking the entire day for the meeting would be adequate, recognizing that, you know, there will be a break partway in the day for a lunch break. And also to note that it will be the last meeting, so it would be very good to get through the entire agenda items for that meeting, as it is the last meeting for this term of council. Thank you. Oh, and one more thing I just wanted to add. What we can do is send an email to the members right after this meeting, just to let them know to us prepare for a full day meeting for the next meeting. I know there's some members who were not able to attend today. So we will include the entire membership in that email and also send a follow-up reminder closer to the meeting date. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments before our last motion? Okay, clerks, you can display the last one. And this is for the committee to excuse the absence of Nora Boyer, Andrea Christron, Christine Luza, Sage McKecken, Tanya Sank, and Brian Winters from the May 18th, 2022 Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the presenters, our public speakers. We've asked Larry to close us off in a good way. And I'm wishing you all a beautiful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to say, first of all, Creator, thank you for a beautiful meeting. This was such a unified meeting. Big Rich. I say, Creator, open our hearts to peace and healing between all peoples. Creator, open our hearts to provide and protect for all children of the earth. Creator, open our hearts to respect for the earth and all the gifts of the earth. Creator, open our hearts to end exclusion, violence, and fear among all. Thank you for the gifts of this day and every day. What I say, Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech.
Bye all. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.